She's an educationist. She is an educationist with extensive experience in teaching, curriculum development, teacher education, and education research. She currently leads the Climate and Education Program at Azar Social Impact Advisors, a core partner of the Climate Educators Network. Welcome, everyone. And Pallavi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maithili. Hi and good evening, everyone. This is going to be a very exciting discussion. Welcome to the conversation around bridging the gap, climate education in the national curriculum, and what it means for educators. The proposed changes to the NCERT curriculum 2026 that will include environmental education offer an opportunity to address long-standing gaps in environmental education in India. This webinar is designed to help educators, policymakers, curriculum developers, and the wider ecosystem understand a few things. One, the shortcomings of the current curriculum. Two, expected changes and new approaches proposed in 2026. And that includes, will climate change education be included and how? And the third, how educators and the ecosystem can adapt and support effective climate education. I'd now like to quickly introduce our wonderful speakers for this evening. Dr. Chong Shimre is a faculty member at the Department of Education in Science and Mathematics at the National Council of Educational Research and Training, NCERT, New Delhi. Since 2004, she has been actively involved in developing curriculum materials for science and environmental education and has authored numerous publications in the field. In addition to her work in NCERT, she has independently authored 2 books, Teaching Environmental Education, Trends and Practices in India, and Understanding Environmental Education, Theory and Practices in India. Chong has been a 2-time Fulbright Nehru Fellow in the United States in 2009 to 2010, and again in 2017 to 2018. In 2022, she was also awarded the Chevening Research, Science and Innovation Leadership Fellowship, a program hosted by the University of Oxford in the United Kingdom. Next, I'd like to introduce Sabina Fatima, an experiential educator who founded Sunnyside, a K-12 experiential learning school in Chennai that integrates climate education into children's learning. Her approach blends classroom discussions with field visits and real-world explorations. Climate education isn't treated as a standalone subject. Instead, it is woven into hands-on, inquiry-driven learning journeys. Over 3 years, Sunnyside's environmental sciences program has evolved into children exploring local biodiversity, leading them to recognize issues like waste management. This awareness deepened into scientific inquiry, understanding climate change, the carbon cycle, and its local impact. The next phase focused on Chennai's changing landscapes, where students researched the effects on fishing communities, food systems, and water bodies. We will hear from Sabina on her experience on engaging children in meaningful explorations about climate. Our next wonderful educator panelist is Saumi Rattagupta. She is the founder of Regen Ed Foundation and an educator working at the intersection of education, ecology, and regenerative thinking. She brings a living being way of teaching and learning into diverse spaces, working with children across age groups in non-formal settings, in schools with teachers, in universities with students on regenerative thinking. Her work integrates an ecological worldview and systems awareness to reimagine how we learn and live. Our final panelist, Dr. Rahul Chopra, is the director of the Center for Sustainability, Environment and Climate Change and an associate professor of environmental studies at Flame University, India. He is also the project director of a global climate change education project of the International Union of Biological Sciences that aims to integrate climate change education into the curriculum worldwide. With a PhD from the University of Chicago, USA, he has multidisciplinary interests ranging from curriculum development to data-driven and field-based research in geological and Environmental Studies. Welcome, our panelists, and thank you for making the time. I'd like to get straight into our first area of conversation, and this is around the EE policy, that's the Environment Education Policy, and what gaps and shifts we see. In that, I'd like to first direct my question to Dr. Shimre. From your reading of the National Curriculum Framework, that's the NCF SE 2023, could you please shed light on some of the most significant gaps in how environmental education is currently conceptualized?
Yeah, thank you, Pallavi, for that very generous introduction. And also good to see I can see 78 participants. Greetings to you all. So before I come to the gaps, I think it will be good for the audience to also quickly understand what are the positive aspects, you see. So let me start with the when NCF talks about environmental education, so it suggests that it has to be implemented in two ways. One is as a cross-cutting area, and it calls it learning about and caring for the environment. And so this learning about and caring for the environment is going to cut across all subject areas and all grades. And so that is a very positive aspect about the NCF 2023. And so if anybody has read it, then it'll be very interesting for people to see that, even in subject like philosophy, there is a topic called environmental philosophy, where students will be engaged to think abstractly about questions related to environmental issues, including climate change, who to blame, who not to blame, what are the current solutions in terms of ethics and all that. So this is one of the positive aspect of NCF 2023, that it proposes or recommends that it has to be incorporated in all subject areas wherever possible in all grades. Second positive aspect is that environmental education has been introduced as a separate subject in grade 10. So which never was the case before. And so I take it as a positive step. At least, something is being introduced concretely, in addition to the infusion approach or the cross-cutting aspect of environmental education in different subject areas. And even in grade 11 and 12, an optional subject is introduced that is called sustainability and climate change. And so, as you can understand from the title itself, so it's going to be heavily climate change focused. So I thought that's a positive, very good step in a right direction in the current situation that we are living in. So those are the three very important, recommendations of NCF, which I thought they are very good for environmental educators and also for people who are concerned about the planet. So coming to the gaps, there are a few gaps, of course, just like any other policy document. NCF SC 2023 also is not without gaps. And so let me just point out those gaps so that people who are implementing it make sure that those gaps are filled. So first thing is that I mentioned environmental education being introduced as a separate subject in grade 10 as a positive step. But it could also be a negative step, or it could also be misunderstood by many stakeholders, thinking that, okay, now environmental education is to be taught only in grade 10. So that is something which implementers or the stakeholders have to be very careful about, that it is not just that it is to be taught in grade 10, but we also have the cross-cutting area of environmental education throughout different stages in different subjects. So that could be a positive as well as, a negative aspect if people do not read it carefully, the NCF 2023. So that was one gap I thought which stakeholders have to be very careful when they're implementing environmental education. Second is environmental education and climate change. As we all know, it is not just about doing something nice and cute and that. It also has its concepts of its own, right? So which NCF failed to, concretely lay out is that the concepts related to environment or climate change for that matter, how systematically it has to be included has not been clearly laid out. So it has left it to the stakeholders to, decipher what they want to teach in different grades. So I thought, again, if implementers, stakeholders are trying to implement it, then they have to make sure that, this systematic inclusion of the concepts related to the environment and climate change in particular, they have to make sure that that is included in a graded manner. So that's something, again, which stakeholders have to look into that. So I felt that is another gap kind of in the NCF, which needs to be catered to. The third, I would say that, yeah, as I said, students are taught different concepts related to environment and climate change in different grades. But the thing is that, do teachers or students even know that whatever they are, learning about environment or climate change in bits and pieces in different grades, that is going to ultimately lead them to understand something bigger? For example, if you have to understand climate change as such, as a concept, then you have to understand about conduction, convection, reflection, radiation, the gases, how they behave, and all of those. So students study about all this in different grades, but do they study in such a way that all this understanding is going to lead them to understand something that is bigger, like climate change or global warming for matter? Similarly with air pollution. So what are the properties of different, particles or properties of different gases and things like that? That is only about science again. And there are other aspects of social science and the law aspects. So do students or teachers understand that whatever they're studying in different subject areas or different, things related to environment or climate change, that's ultimately going to help them in understanding these bigger concerns or issues that we are talking about? So that is something which has not been clearly laid out in NCFSE. Again, stakeholders and implementers might want to look into that whenever they're preparing curriculum materials and resources. So that's one thing. And again, one thing that NCF SE talks about, who is going to teach this separate subject called environmental education in grade 10, it says that it will be taught by science teacher. But as we know, all know that, environmental education is not just about science concepts. It is interdisciplinary in its aspects, in its approach. And so it has, all kinds of things, the values, the emotions, the justice aspect, the ethics aspects, all of these are there. And so most of the time, teachers, science teachers, might miss out addressing those aspects. So that is the fear that I have personally. And so again, states, if they're implementing environmental education in grade 10, it will be good for them to ensure that the teachers are, looking at this subject holistically in interdisciplinary way. So that is something that NCF has mentioned, which I thought maybe stakeholders might want to be careful when they're implementing that, or selecting teachers, or identifying teachers, or recruiting teachers to teach that subject. And again, related to, again, teacher training, if you are aware about the integrated teacher education program, this 4-year integrated program for the pre-service courses, unfortunately, even now, we still do not have, students getting option for the pedagogy of environmental education or climate change. So there is something called ability enhancement and value added courses. Under that, citizenship education, sustainability, and environmental education is included as one of the aspects. So in this, if students opt for this, what's going to happen is that they will learn something about it, but they will not learn how to teach. So we still do not have a course which will prepare teachers how to teach, how to handle this subject called environmental education or climate change. So these are the 5 gaps, or so to say, points which implementers or stakeholders from different states or different boards, they might want to look into this 5 aspects whenever they are preparing resources or looking to the recruitment of teachers. So I will stop at that. So yeah, thank you so much for that
Thank
question.
you so much, Chong, because this really, thank you so much for actually pointing us in directions that we need to be looking at, given the gaps. Now, I just want to kind of leave the policy realm for a bit and kind of enter classroom realities. Somi and Sabina, this is kind of addressed to both of you. So whichever one of you wants to go first. In your experience, and both of you interact a lot with school children and educate them on climate and environmental aspects in learning spaces, both inside and outside classrooms. From your experience, what changes have you noticed in how children think, feel, or act after learning about the environment, about climate change? Also, how do these alternative spaces that are created outside school, right? And also alternative schools. How do they shape children's learning, especially in ways that still connect with the goals of the national curriculum framework or the NEP? Actually, if you can talk about how it connects with the NEP, yeah.
Me, would you be going ahead or should I?
Yeah, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much first for the warm welcome. Yeah, and Dr. Shimresh, I think she's like elaborated a lot. I mean, it was quite good. Like, she gave a good gist of what to say, what the NCF has laid out and what are the kind of gaps. So, with respect to the question that you've posed, what do we see in the classrooms, right? The first thing is, if you see the thought, right, it starts with just a thought of, it's more like wonder, curiosity. That's what, in the early years for children who are exposed to environmental education, right? It starts somewhere there, and then gradually it moves on to care and concern, right? So that's a feeling. They start having empathy, and then small acts of, they start off on small acts, like what to say, they remind their parents about certain things, about, like, say, for example, segregation of waste at home. And if I have to cite an example from our children at school, like, we had a child who refused to go for a zoo trip with his parents, saying that, a zoo is not a place where animals are supposed to be, right? So I'm not coming there with you, right? So this was quite unexpected from the parents. So, and then even when we go out to the beaches, when we go to the shore walk, right, now they're very careful about not hoarding shells, because they know that we're not supposed to take away so many shells from the beach, and their purpose of why they should be there and things like that. And then small exercise of trying to compost, create their own small compost bin if possible. So these kind of small acts that we do see, in the early years as they start getting exposed, and how their mindset towards the environment around them changes actually. And then as they grow much older, they start asking even larger questions as to why is this construction happening over a marshland, right? And to if the city gets flooded after a rain, like Chennai is known for that, right? So if it gets flooded, they're like, they don't directly go to government policies. They're talking about humans have done some mistake to the ecosystem, some tampering has happened, and that's why we see this. So we see this happening at the older years, right? But the key thing is that these things we see in the classroom, it is actually a result of very prolonged exposure. It is not like a one-off thing that was done, as an extracurricular activity or an art class or something like that. This is something when it is, part and parcel of your daily life, daily learning, right? I think these are the kind of changes that come about in children themselves. Their mindset and who they actually end up becoming completely changes actually, right? So, and as to what you asked about how do alternative spaces contribute, I think alternative spaces, I mean, we're able to give that experiential, that holistic vision that NEP has, where it's value driven, where it, what to say, promotes citizenship. I think alternative spaces are able to do justice to that particular, what to say, what NEP wants to achieve, right? Yeah, so I think these are my few points that I want to share. Yeah.
Thank you, Sabina.
Thank you.
Somi, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for the warm welcome. And it was, yeah, very enriching. And carrying from what Sabina said, it's very similar. I think because we are, I mean, at least my space is non-formal learning space, and I'm not bound by any mandates. So I have the liberty to, explore, iterate, and reiterate to, integrate this ecological consciousness among children. And also, I have the, flexibility to work with children across age groups, from preschoolers to university students across disciplines. And what I consistently see is that when ecological consciousness is integrated into the learning process, into the methodology, the learning gets connected to life, their daily life, as just what Sabina said just now. So they change in the way they think, they feel, they act. So what happens is there's a space which is created for an ecological worldview, and it sits alongside with the dominant worldview, and which the a worldview which still you know treats nature as an external and extractable resource. So I think that so in this alternative space, because we do not we have the flexibility to work around, we can kind of, this ecological worldview sips it. So I'll just share three glimpses of how these plays out in practice from my experience in three age groups. So one is with the grade 1 students. So I was once invited to do a workshop, 3 weeks workshop, nature writing workshop at the school. And it was a writing workshop, but I tried to weave in the science, through of water cycle, through storytelling, and where the trees become the rain makers. And I try, and there I had used tribal tales to infuse the indigenous wisdom. I did it consciously because I felt that, it is very important for us also to communicate the worldview that they have, because their worldview says that we are a part of nature and not apart from it. So that is one thing. And second, I tried to, and we did it actually. We did this workshop under the tree. So what happened was not only the tree, but the birds, the bees, even the snails and the slugs, they all became a part of the learning process, the learning ecosystem. And hence it was very experiential. We could do it, of course, because it was February in Gurgaon, we could do it then. But what I saw, what was very interesting was, because it was experiential, it each child there could find their own entry points. For some it was the soil, the mud. For some the grasses which were actually poking them. For some it was the bees. For some it was the snails and slugs. So actually one day it rained, though it was spring, but we had rain in that stint. So what happened is, next day one child comes and says that, ma'am, Snug's mother will always find her baby. Her baby will never get lost. So I said, why so? So she said that, because it always leaves a white line whenever it is gliding ahead. So I think that was very powerful, that it was, so it kind of imbibed the power of noticing. And I think when we talk about competencies and the skills that are needed, art of noticing is a very important skill when it comes to environmental education or climate education. Another thing which I think was, because she said that, it sparked a lot of conversation around it. So why is it leaving that trail? So it was talking about the mucus. So why is it so? So, I think that was the seed of scientific inquiry. And it came very spontaneously, very, very naturally, without being science or the arts and language arts and all of that. The same workshop I did in a non-formal setting, and after a while, because these kind of impact stays. After a while, another child writes to me saying that, ma'am, 2 trees were cut down the street, and a lot of squirrels and birds lost their homes. So these things, they start noticing. There's a shift in consciousness, I think. For the middle school, I think this awareness grows into action. Again, from my experience, I would say one of the programs that I do, it's called the Change Maker program, where they worked on SDG 6, which is water, and 12, which is responsible consumption. So at the end of the project, the program, they do a capstone project, and they were guided by the NGO experts who give them on-ground perspective. So there, what happened was one of the child who was working with water, she started, while she was doing water audit, she started looking at what happens to the waste water which is wasted. Like what Sabina said, that, they start seeing what is happening to the waste around. And she found that the black water is treated in STP, but the gray water, what happens to the water which is going out from our kitchen or from the washing machine? So that has so heavy in, which is so heavy in detergents and other polluting things, and which pollutes the groundwater, which is already, we are running in dates in Haryana and this area, NCR area. So she actually took it up to this issue to the RWA. So I feel this is not awareness, this is responsibility or agency. Another last experience is, I just recently had a workshop with the architecture students in Pune. They were undergrad and also urban planners, postgrad and urban planners. So we were trying to see why, the question that we were trying to explore is why city floods every monsoon. Pune, it was in Pune, it floods every monsoon, but yet it faces severe droughts in summer. So the systems mapping that they did, they saw that, watershed is such an important principle or central to urban planning. And for me as a facilitator, I felt that, they transcended from just being designers or an urban planner to the custodians of ecosystem. So I think across all age groups, the pattern is same. So when this ecological worldview is integrated into learning, the students, they start feeling with empathy, they start thinking more responsibly, and also an agency comes in, they act with agency. So I think NEP, if you bring this down, bring this to NEP, tie it to NEP talks about experiential, value driven, life connecting learning. Yeah, so this is my experience.
Thank you so
Pallavi-
much. I almost don't want to ask the next question to both of you because,
Pallavi, sorry, but we have only a few more minutes in this segment. So request all the panelists for brief answers, please.
Thanks, Maithili, for keeping us sharp on time. But quickly, we do want to hear from both of you very briefly. What do you see as challenges, to integrating environmental consciousness into everyday learning? So you've spoken about how you're able to do it and how you see that emerging, but what have been some of these challenges and particularly in the ways that are aligned with the NEP?
Should I go ahead first? Yeah. Okay. So I think, see, education today is in transition. We are standing between two worlds: the older exam-driven, content-heavy, which is grade-driven, which has to be because it is feeding to the higher education, and there's another new world which is meaningful, connected. So that teachers are asked to straddle, are expected to straddle both. So which is a tall task, I think. So the real challenge is not the policy vision. I think it is the translation. So for that, training is very, very important. But again, when it comes to training, I think one size fits all prescription will not, it's not, that's what my experience is, because I have worked with teachers across 3 states. I wouldn't say states, bioregions, I would say. And so I think the training modules have to be robust, but it has to have an adaptable framework which can be used. And quickly, 2 points, another 2 points which I feel has to be there is, one, it has to be interdisciplinary and not multidisciplinary when we talk about this thing, because it is very important for the students to be able to learn to connect various disciplines, because climate crisis is very interdisciplinary, and not why only climate crisis, all the crisis, ecological, environmental, social, everything is so interconnected. Now what happens is, when we do multidisciplinary, because when we talk about bringing disciplines together, it's mostly multidisciplinary approach which is done. So what happens is, then the subjects are sitting side by side, because when you teach neighborhood, for example, the social studies teacher will be talking about mapping the area, maths will be talking about working on the distance, or English a poem, like that. So this shift has to be interdisciplinary. Now, where you actually bring in a question which maybe a challenge, an issue which is very contextual, and then you map it to the various subjects. Like, if for neighborhood, if we're talking about for the middle school or higher school students, why is my neighborhood becoming hotter? Or even in Pune, why is it that we are getting so much rain and it is it's scarce in the winter, during the summers. So what happens is the each subjects it builds in. So it gives that whole picture. The system consciousness sets in when you are using it, when the approach is interdisciplinary. Now, for that, we need to make a framework which can be used across the country, across bioregion. It will be very different, but an adaptable framework which the teachers can use has to, it has to be very, it has to have that, flexibility for them to integrate the local, their context. So the second point, which automatically flows in, is to be, integrate the place-based learning, because as we all know that, the climate change is global, but it is a global phenomenon, but it manifests locally, whether it is Kerala flood, Bengal cyclone, or the flash flood. So it has to be, it cannot be abstract or distant for the children. It has to happen it has to be connected to their own local context. So then the entry points also becomes easier for various subjects, and also different kinds of learners. Since we are running short of time, so I wouldn't be able to give you an example, but yeah, I think this is what it is.
Thanks, Tommy. I just want to kind of quickly move over to Rahul. Rahul, as someone who's kind of leading Project Tropicsu, and can you talk a little bit about what it is doing for climate change education, and how is it helping teachers navigate curriculum gaps in climate education? And what kind of impact have you seen from these tools and resources? And what have you seen them do really for classroom practice?
Yeah, thank you. So thanks, Pallavi, and thank you, CM, and hello all. Yeah, so I'd like to I'll be brief and talk about what Project Tropicsu is attempting to do, but just to pick up, threads that Chong has mentioned in terms of it's heartening to see a new sort of framework in the pipeline. And then, also to pick up on something that Sabina mentioned, Somi's also mentioned, which is, the wonderful work that they are doing, which seems to match everything that an ideal teacher, an ideal school should do. And yet it is being called an alternative school. Even if the NEP is calling it, all the things that are mentioned are being done so wonderfully well by y'all, why is it not part of, the mainstream? And I think we all understand it is not part of the mainstream because of our scale. And also in terms of the inequality, whether it is in terms of access, or it is in terms of quality, or is it in terms of budgets, etc., which makes it a very, very difficult problem. We're not the first people to say this, and we won't be the last either, right? So it's heartening to see what is happening at the school level, which is, in terms of under the umbrella of environmental education. And the NEP, mentions, the idea that we should integrate environment with all sort of subjects. Climate change specifically is not mentioned other than in very broad terms to say it is, of course, an issue and it should be looked at from the education perspective. So, we understand all of these are difficult. Climate change is certainly a difficult problem. Swami's mentioned that an inter-multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, local, location-based, all sorts of pedagogical tools should be used by teachers and to kind of give them the freedom to adapt it to their context, their kids, their locations. So Project Tropicsu came into existence to try to do this. Right. So what we actually want to do through this particular project is make quality climate change education accessible to all. So that starts with the simple question, which is, well, one is what is quality? Two is how do you make it accessible to all? And what should be, something which can actually work? So if I look at NEP and I say climate change doesn't have a space right now, or we look at our curriculum today in the higher education level, climate change is not offered as a major at undergrad level. It is maybe offered in an environmental studies program, but there are very few colleges which actually are offering even environmental studies majors. Space exists from a compulsory 6-month long Supreme Court enforced rule to offer environmental studies to all, and that has been revised recently to have a substantial amount of time for climate change. So right now, there are not many avenues for us to meaningfully offer this in a long sort of sustained way with the attention that it deserves, considering it is one of the most critical issues of our time. So what do, right? So one is that you try with the help of policymakers to actually introduce climate change as a full standalone course. Maybe it deserves that much attention. So if that does happen, which is something which everyone in this audience might want, well, who is trained then to actually deliver that course? Because none of the teachers have gone through this in the system thus far. So Project Tropixu is now in the process of creating these faculty development programs so that an educator can learn about the basics of climate science, as well as learn as how to implement it in their classroom through multidisciplinary styles of pedagogy using location-specific examples. So that's one, and I'll just end immediately after the second point, which is, well, what do we do today? We can't wait for policy to come and say, let's have a climate major, let's have a climate undergrad class or a graduate class. What do you do today? And how do we do it at scale? So the way in which we thought we would try to address this is to say, how do you get an individual teacher or a professor to teach a topic in their discipline, which they are fully trained to do, but you integrate it with some sort of climate example or case study, preferably using a location-specific example, preferably using a digital tool which might appeal to today's generation of learners. For example, if you're a school teacher teaching grammar, instead of using a textbook, can you use climate text from the IPCC? Ask the same questions. If you are a math teacher and you have to teach algebra, can you give an example of sea level rise to do so, or trigonometry? Or if you are a college professor teaching, differentiation and integration, can you use carbon dioxide emission data? This way, and we've done this and created lesson plans and teaching tools for 10 different disciplines with multiple sub-disciplines in there. You can integrate climate understanding with topics that you already teach. So the teacher doesn't have to be trained in knowing climate science right now. Of course, for their own interest, they can learn. So they are just teaching topics that they are supposed to as per the syllabus, but they're integrating it from with climate studies. And I'll end by saying, now think about a kid who goes through a process like this through school and college. So that kid will learn about climate change from the humanities perspective, from the social studies perspective, from the chemistry perspective, physics, math, economics, etc., etc. And given the ability to have it be relatable to them through location-specific examples, will probably be well aware of climate change, and then potentially can document what is happening at their location, and maybe in the time to come also be part of climate solutions. So that's Project Tropixu. It's a free to use educational resource. It has 800 lesson plans and teaching tools from experts around the world that any teacher of any discipline can use in their classroom. Adapt our lesson plans, use it as per your requirements. Yeah, so that's what we are doing, Pallavi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rahul. My next couple of questions are again to you and Jong. And if you could just answer really briefly, looking ahead, Jong, what key shifts do you anticipate in the embedding of climate change into the upcoming environmental education curriculum? And Rahul, to you, the question is, how can teachers adapt to these proposed changes? And what support can the broader ecosystem and specifically initiatives such as Tropic Zoo provide?
So I go first. Okay. Yeah, so I mentioned about some of the gaps that's there in the NCF. And so what we're trying to do now is, as we write the textbook for grade 10, 11, and 12, so we're trying to make sure that, the gaps that were visible in the NCF document, we're trying to fill those. And so we're trying to make the textbooks as, holistic as possible, as effective, meaningful as possible. So that's the attempt that we are into right now. And similarly for grade 11 and 12 as well, the sustainability and climate change. So we are working on that as well. As Somi mentioned about the interdisciplinarity, so these textbooks will be totally interdisciplinary in its approach. So that's something which we hopefully will be a good textbook. But again, as many of the speakers have said about, teachers' unpreparedness. So the fear is that will the teacher be able to deliver the content? So that's another concern, of course, but we're not even bothered about that right now. We're trying to come up with a very good textbook for now. So that's where we're working on. And also the training program. So in order to fill that gap, what we have done is that NCERT, in collaboration with Center for Environment Education and UNICEF, so we recently prepared this training module for all teachers so that they have a basic understanding about climate change. And as Rahul mentioned, we also attempted to do this, how different teachers teaching different subjects can incorporate, or use these concepts related to climate, or the content related to climate, like in plotting the graph or in studying algebra, trigonometry, or things like, or even in language. So we have tried to do that. And in that module, we have attempted to do that. And we have, in fact, we had already done one training program with teachers or participants from 16 states. So that was the first trial kind of program that we have had. And we hope to do more of that in the days to come too. So that's how we're trying to, address or trying to implement more effectively things related to environmental education, climate change. Yeah, I think I'll stop at that.
Thanks, Jong.
Yeah, sorry, what did you want me to address, Pallavi?
Rahul, I just wanted to wanted you to say, how can teachers adapt to these changes, right? I mean, Chong just talked about how some of these provisions are being made. So how can teachers adapt to these changes and these new developments? And how can the wider ecosystem and, players such as Tropic Zoo actually support this adoption?
Yeah, I think it's tough, right? It's tough being a teacher, first and foremost. It's also tough being young at in this age that we are living in, with uncertainty, and climate change is certainly adding to it as we speak. So one of the main sort of things, and Chong will mention, and I think Sabina Somi will sort of know because they live it, is that teachers are extremely burdened already with everything that they do. So if we want to ask educators to learn climate change and environmental education and integrate it into their everyday teaching, there has to be some space created for them to do so. Now, in the higher education, sort of scenario, promotions might be tied towards taking faculty development programs. So it gets built into the system. So if you have to do things at scale, then it has to be built into the system. Now, resources exist. And those resources like Tropics who can sort of, play a fairly big role in actually delivering quality education through both training as well as resources. And but the question is, will the broad ecosystem, actually take these resources and put them into their programs and mention to teachers that they can be trained through this or the other. That is the goal of organizations such as us, which is to try to say we have to then try to get into the system for it to go to the wider ecosystem and provide the support. I don't think resources are lacking. So it's about educators getting the time, the space, and being requested to actually uh, you know use all of these resources in their everyday teaching adapted to their situations, uh, but not be asked to do this over and above their jobs. People in this audience are doing it out of their own passion and their own love. But for a large proportion of educators, if it is just a job, then how do you make sure it starts to go through? So again, it's a question of again scaling, and then the ability to then have the system work such that this gets disseminated in the most efficient way possible.
Thank you. That really brings us to a close with regard to, sharings by our speakers. I just want to pick two questions from the question and answer box. I see that, questions have been coming in from early on, but maybe some of those answers came through in what the speakers were sharing. So I'm going to pick a couple of questions. So anyone on the panel, please feel free to respond briefly. So the first question I think I'll pick is from Pooja, and her question is, what are the actions that are being taken or can be taken to plug the gap in the environment education and climate change education in the pre-service teacher training? And maybe I'll just kind of pick the other question, and then we can have anyone just respond. And this is from Payal. Yes, interdisciplinary and intergenerational, but my question is, does the NEP guidelines or the government schools provide time for teachers to attend workshops with NGOs that are working in the field? So these are two questions. Sabina, Somi, please, even as educators, if you have found there are some of these barriers or some of these opportunities, please do.
So can I respond to Pooja's question?
Sure,
Pooja's
Tom,
question?
yes.
I think to some extent, I have addressed it in my response. Pre-service, this is what, if you have to scale up, then the pre-service, and I'm actually very ambitious about this, the whole thing. I go one step ahead of what Rahul is looking forward to. I would say that, if somebody is supposed to teach environmental education grade 10, or let's say a teacher who is going to teach sustainability and climate change, that subject in grade 11 and 12, I really feel that they need to clear some credits, in different aspects of that subject. So not just anybody, science teacher getting some training quickly and getting into that. More than that, I will go, beyond that, and expect that in the years to come, we will have something like a credit requirement, like some aspect of environmental science, let's say, economics, which you cannot do sustainability without understanding how economics works, or, the social science, the law aspect, and psychology. Psychology is so important, philosophy, in all of these aspects, they need to have some credits, so that if you are to be teaching these subjects, it should not be just random person just walking into the class and teaching. I think we need to get serious with this subject, and for that pre-service courses are very, very important. As of now, as I mentioned, the ITEP course, integrated teacher education program, do not have any provision to prepare teachers to teach this subject. So that's where we're missing, and hopefully in the years to come, as NEP and NCFSE is implemented, and as teacher education, NCF for teacher education is being prepared, and once it comes out, hopefully things might improve in the right direction. Yeah.
Thank you, Chong. Does anyone on the panel want to take Payal's question around time for teachers to attend workshops? Does the NEP guidelines kind of make any provision or encourage that? In your experience, have you felt, and you've also interacted with many other educators?
So I just want to add one. So I recently had a teachers training program, and where I spoke about interdisciplinarity, and the teachers and educators were very open to it. We did a very adaptable framework, integrating. So during the training process, it evolved very well. But now when they want to implement it in their class, so what happens is, if you have to make it interdisciplinary, they need to come together and work on it, right? So that time also is they are burdened with so much. I mean, not only they are expected to to the old school thing, but as also they are expected to be they make learning interdisciplinary, inclusive, with standard assessment way of. So I think and then there are so much of administrative work because of IT and all of that coming in. So I think that the leadership of schools have to step in here, at least until there is, like what Shong was saying, that there is a proper credit course on this. uh, we so until that, what do we do? So there, I think it is very important that you deal as it comes. So here the leadership should step in and should give some some space. I mean, I really don't know how to do it, but I'm not also the right person to comment on it. But yeah, I think that is where so that space, at least that much space for them to come together and at least try to do a interdisciplinary place-based lesson plan. And they can do it. I mean, the teachers I've met are brilliant. So it is not that if you give them a framework, they really can do it. I mean, the way it has had evolved from my experience and just recent experience. So I think that is something which, and I'm sure the leaderships are also very open to it. So it just need to come together, to do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Sami. Thank you so much. Really sorry we're not able to take all questions. But I think some of you have also been putting in your questions in the chat, lots of great questions. Hope you'll continue to have conversations with different people and keep these questions alive. I just want to, at the last, we'll just take another 10 minutes or so. I want to invite Dr. Jayanti Ray Mukherjee, who is one of the co-founders of the Climate Educators Network. Jayanti, if you can switch on your camera, and if you can share some remarks based on the conversation and discussion you just heard.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Jayanti, we can.
Hi. Thank you, Pallavi. And I think I would like to start by saying that when we first conceptualized this session or having this webinar, I didn't really expect it to be turning out so well. I think it is wonderful to have you all. So first, I would like to thank all the attendees, the participants who are here today. It really made it special to have you all engaging. And those are some really wonderful questions we see on the chat, which unfortunately we cannot address all of them. Going forward, I would like to thank our speakers here today. Dr. Chong Shimre, thanks for joining us. Sabina, thank you so much. Nice to see you again. Shomi, thank you so much it was wonderful listening to you. And Dr. Rahul Chopra, thank you again for your wonderful insights and also doing a part of integrating what had been spoken before, right? So I would just like to say that I think this session turned out wonderfully because it actually weaves along the speakers. And by that, what I mean is when Chong started with the gaps in the system, she really started it well with learning about and caring for environment, what NCERT or NEP does. So the vision is correct, right? So the vision is correct. We just have to find out ways to reach that vision. So the gaps are wonderfully set there. So it's a very, I was really happy to see that 10th grade will now have a full subject to it. And Chong, as she said, that it's so it should not be misinterpreted that in the environmental science is only done on 10th grade, but there should be a slow integration to the process, and bits of information coming across grades should aggregate to the 10th standard. So people who don't get the environmental science or climate science exposure in other stages will not be able to get the full subject, comprehend that information, right? So it has to be integrated into the system. And I think it opens up wonderfully these all gaps that I thought was coming along, but also being addressed. For example, the alternative schools, how they actually address these gaps is wonderfully was stated by examples. Thanks for sharing all the insights. And a lot of them brought out that the concepts as well as experiential learning has to be integrated together, right? Not only interdisciplinarity and systems approach in the teaching, but conceptual understanding as well as experiential learning has to come together. Thanks to Shami, she brought out the power of observation and how that actually should be integrated to the system for bringing in dispositional changes in our students for the future, right? I think that is a wonderful way to go. And I'm really glad that these two alternative schools, the approaches that they have stated out, they actually are very well aligned with the vision of our NEP. So, the only challenge here I am seeing, or the actual gaps which are coming out, is I would really like to stress upon are the teacher training, powerful teacher training, and the time for the teachers to do these trainings, as well as some incentives, right? So I would like to, state one example from my own life. Like when I first joined came to this occupation of teaching, someone told me that, oh, you can, I was little bit scared when I was going to teach a subject which I didn't know anything about. And that person said, yeah, you should be at this stage, you should be able to go and teach anything, I think that is the mistake. I think you go and teach, and I think Chong also brought it up. It's not that just one fine day you go and teach some material you yourself learn, and you just go and talk that in front of students. That is not what we want. We really want the teachers not to be trained in a way of these modules that we are designing, but also the teachers should be well read. Well, they should have a thought process where they can integrate and they can think about these interdisciplinarities in their own lives and the way they deliver those lectures, right? That is very important, I think. And of course, as Rahul brought up, it's not that it's not happening. People like a lot of people like alternate school, and we have the passion and the love for doing this kind of work. That's the reason we have all come together for some good to do this good work. And for a lot of us, it's like the second job that we are doing, but we still find the time to do it, right? So I think that passion and love for training teachers, for engaging with students, not only in school, but anywhere you go, right? It make it a point to engage with them anywhere you go. And so it also brings in the thought process within you. So it's not limited only to the class. It's also becomes a dispositional change for yourself, right? All of us, all of the educators. I think that has to come in and get integrated in the system. I think most of us realize that blaming, or mourning or whining about the system will not change anything. And the government is really putting emphasis and time and making these efforts to change these things. We have to just keep on supporting them. And as educator, it becomes our bringing that love and passion to the system to make the national education policy's vision successful, right? With that, I would like to thank again all of you, and thanks for coming and joining us today. Please, if you have really good questions, please share that on email or reach out to us, and we will make sure that we get your responses from the speakers. Thank you so much. Thanks again from the CEN family.
Thank you, Jayanti, for your eloquent remarks and observations of the discussion. I just want to take one more minute to just kind of bring up an upcoming event from the Climate Educators Network, which is the summit in the next Climate Ed Summit, which will be in Chennai in January 2026. So do keep yourself informed via the website and our social media handles, which is, I think it's been posted here in the chat box. And so we look forward to having some of you attend. If you can, that would be wonderful. Also, do take a look at the website. It is a platform for educators, by educators, and keep interacting and staying in touch with the Climate Educators Network. Thank you so much for joining us at the end of a hectic work week. I hope it's been an engaging discussion, an eye-opening discussion for you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pallavi. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.